RealAg Live. And welcome to RealAg Live, everybody. I'm your host, Shaun Haney. How about that new camera view? We now have not one, not two, not three, but actually 4 cameras set up now in the RealAg studios here in Lethbridge, Alberta. Thanks a lot, everybody, for tuning in to RealAg Live today. Today is kind of it's a first. We have a RealAg Live in studio guest. It is Autumn Barnes of the Canola Council of Canada. Autumn, how are you?
I'm doing really well. Thank you.
We're going to talk canola today. We're going to have a lot of fun.
Absolutely. Looking forward to it.
This is going to be great. So if you have any questions for Autumn related to canola, save your wheat questions for Peter Wheat Pea Johnson maybe next week. Today is about canola. So if you have a canola question, you can ask it in the comment box below, whether you're watching on YouTube, Twitter, or Facebook. We're streaming on all 3 platforms. We're still trying to figure out the LinkedIn stream. Hopefully we'll get that sorted out soon so all of our followers on LinkedIn can watch as well. So we're going to wait for some audience questions. We're going to get to it, Autumn. Now, growers, this is the time of the year where they really are thinking about plant stand counts. And we don't call it stand establishment now. We call it plant establishment.
Yeah, we're rebranding.
Why the change?
I think just from our perspective, we're doing a bunch of edits to our canola encyclopedia, and that was all branded stand establishment. And I think it's more, we want to think about individual plants, right? Trying to get to that point where we're planting one seed to get one plant. And so it's really just about rebranding it, naming it that. It's not really that exciting, I guess, of a thing to hang on to for us. But plant establishment sure kind of brings the focus back on the individual plant and not that, driving by through the truck. Yeah, it looks okay. Sort of mentality. Okay,
so let's go through the process. When should we do it? And what are some kind of rules to live by?
Yeah, so when should you do it? All the time. Anytime you can, go walk through your canola fields, no matter what stage you're in. But when you're checking for establishment, and the canola across the prairies we've got everything from, guys maybe still seeding, or the tail end of that, like up in the Peace in central Alberta, trying to get seed in the ground, to, down here, rosette, maybe starting to bolt. So really, like when you're done seeding, maybe go out, say 10, 14 days after seeding, start to look and see what's coming up out of the ground, dig around, look for seeds that haven't come up yet, and then get an idea. I mean, you can take a hoop with you and toss the hoop around and get an idea if you've got some, quite a few cotyledons coming up. Then it's always a good idea to get a good idea or get an idea of numbers. But then also, like in terms of, right now we're getting to the end of the flea beetle window. Around mid-June, the adults tend to die off of this generation. But if you were scouting for flea beetles, having that plant count hoop with you is really good too, to kind of throw the hoop, get an idea of your percent damage in that hoop at that stage, and then move on and count another area. So really, when you want to do emergence all the time, establishment counts all the time, but for emergence specifically, you'd want to wait until after that 2 to 4 leaf stage, or some people wait till after their first pass of herbicide, just in case they've got any volunteers. You certainly wouldn't want to count any plants that are not in a seed row, though. So,
how many times should we throw that hula hoop?
Lots. As many as you can. It's really fun, especially if you're a fiddler.
It's so random.
It is, yeah. And I've been bringing my kids with me to the field a lot these days.
Oh,
and
nice.
So I've got I usually keep like a half dozen hoops. So far, they haven't lost any of those, but there's a lot of seed depth gauges missing in fields I've been in from them. But yeah, to walk around, chuck them. They sort of bounce wherever. Go count. One of my colleagues has sometimes used to throw a wrench to figure out where to go and count, and then do his own measurements.
Is that Gregory?
It is Gregory.
Yeah, that sounds like a very Gregory thing to do.
Yeah, I think the idea though is
dodgeball. If you can dodge a wrench,
you could dodge a ball.
You can dodge a ball.
Totally. Yeah.
Rules to live by.
Yeah. So, but with the hoops, like, I don't know. I'm not very good at doing, I get drawn to certain areas in the field. And so having a hoop with me, one, you get to fiddle with it and walk with it. But another thing, you chuck it, it takes you to a spot instead of, walking to the worst area of the field or the best of the field. Like I was in a hailed out field, on Monday. Today's Wednesday, right? Yeah.
Yep.
On Monday, I was in a hailed out field, and it is easy to get drawn to the bad spots and drawn to the good
Absolutely.
spots, right? So that hula hoop or wrench, if you prefer a wrench, or something else, whatever you've got in your pocket or in your truck, is just a nice way to sort of add a bit of randomness.
Just don't throw it at any family members. Okay.
Ideally.
Lara has a question. Where can a person buy those hula hoops? Just at like Toys R Us, or like is there like a certain agronomic hoop we're searching for?
They're very expensive. I've got my own exclusive brand, actually. No, they're really easy to make. We got some made years ago. Gosh, it took like a year for us to order them or something. It was crazy. You can make your own. It's easy enough. Like you could use. I've seen some made out of like cable. Okay. But really you just use basic geometry to figure out like what the area is going to be. So my hoops, like the yellow Canola Council ones, they're a 1/4 meter squared. So I think it's 56 centimeters across, but it's all
math. There's a lot of math.
Check on canolawatch.org. It says how to make it'll tell you how to make a hoop, what the diameter or what the dimensions should be. You can use like a piece of PVC pipe. You could even buy one from the dollar store and then just like work the math backwards to figure out like what the area of it is and then what area you want. So if you want plants per square foot, how to do the conversion to plants per square foot. If you want to do plants per meter squared. I've got a few extra, so if Lara wants some, she can send me an email and let me know. I can probably send her one. So
nice. Okay, there's more questions coming in here. Awesome stuff. Brian has a question. This is Brian Kennedy, Calgary.
Hey, Brian.
Brian says, you said some planting is still going on for farmers that got hailed out. Is it too late to reseed? Probably depends where you are, but good question.
Yeah, no, I'd say it depends where you are. And you know, like for that hail, like, so Brian lives in Calgary. So hopefully, Brian, I'm not sure if you were part of that hailstorm. Hopefully you're not replacing parts of your house right now.
Yeah.
But really it's sort of like an individual field scenario. This late in the season, it's getting pretty late to be putting canola in. And then depending on how badly the canola got shredded as well, so in some cases, like all of the leaves might be gone, but there might be some growing points intact and the canola can come back from that. So, you know, the field that I was in on Monday, the hail came on Saturday and we could see like a lot of the plants that were dead were already dead. And then we had this we had 50 to 80 kilometer an hour winds after that, which basically took away any dead shredded growing material that wasn't going to happen. So there were some plants that we flagged that it looked like the growing point was still going to make it. And so the grower is going to go back later this week and take a look and see. So sorry, a long answer to your question, Brian, but basically, is it too late to reseed? It's getting pretty late for canola. And I would really have a good discussion with crop insurance and a good walk through the field and take a look and see if it's going to come back. Canola, it's, you know, it sucks to manage as a volunteer because it's kind of like a weed. It can really stool out and grow. So
and that's the problem in the reseeding decision is that I think, you know, different than corn or soybeans, canola has this like sort of branching out, like it'll compensate. And so I think it's really difficult to sort out that decision, maybe more so than any other crop.
I think so. And especially because it can come back, but with something like hail or frost, that's not going to generally take like one plant per square foot across the whole field. It'll be like a hunk that looks really bad. So you kind of need to look at that chunk of field and decide, can I manage this separately, right?
Yeah.
Are there enough plants per square foot or per meter squared in this area to justify keeping it? You know, another thing that would go into that decision is like, do I have problem weeds in this field or in this area? That might make you lean more towards reseeding than leaving a thin stand. So
yeah, because in a part of the reseeding decision too isn't reseeding back into canola.
Mm-hmm.
There, you know, maybe it depends how late we are, but you know, it's a barley or even oats if we're too late.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. Okay, we got another question here from Oiler Crazy Fool. One would argue Oiler fans are all fools, but we won't get into sports.
I won't get into sports.
Oiler Crazy Fool is watching on Periscope, and he wants to ask, how much flea beetle pressure do we need before we have to spray insecticides?
Yeah, that's a great question. So there's an action threshold to spray for flea beetles, and that's at 25% defoliation. So you would look at the cotyledons are always a lot easier to assess than once there's some true leaves coming up, but you'd want to look at the leaf material that's there. If you have 25% damage, then that's when you want to go get your insecticide and get ready to spray. Canola can handle 50% leaf area loss before the flea beetles are doing economic damage. One of the hard things about flea beetles is, well, that they can tend to be patchy, like they'll move in from field margins. So if you only go in at an approach and scout there and you don't get actually in the middle of the field, you might see higher numbers than our average for that field. So you really want to be looking for 25% or greater feeding. 25% can look pretty bad. And again, this is one of those things where it's very easy to be drawn to the bad spot. So make one of those hoops, go chuck it around a few times and write your numbers down. You might be surprised actually if you do it that way that the damage might not be as bad as you think. Also, we're June, gosh, I don't even know what date it is. The 15th?
Like 17th.
17th?
Today.
Thank you. Sorry, guys. But
17th.
But we're June 17th today. So the flea beetle adults that overwintered and came out and have been feeding, those guys are dying off right now. So if you're thinking about spraying right now, look at your crop stage. If you've already got a few true leaves coming and it looks like that canola is maybe getting past it, there's a good chance the pressure is going to be going on a downhill trend right now anyway. So I would just be really careful, especially at this stage of the game in deciding to spray for them.
Okay, Euler Crazy Fool has another question. It's sort of related to flea beetles as well. I'm going to put it up here. And how much do flea beetles hurt the canola in general? Would we need to spray for fungicide?
So I think that Euler Crazy Fool, you're referring to spraying fungicide for blackleg. So there is some discussion that some wounds in the plants, like physical wounds in the plants, can be a way for blackleg to enter the plant. I don't think that research is entirely clear. Like if you have flea beetles, you're going to have blackleg. It's not that simple. Like most things in agronomy are definitely not simple and more complicated than that. But yeah, there can be, or there's thought to be a relationship there. The spraying of fungicide to control blackleg is really more based off of like your overall blackleg risk. So your crop rotation, if there's any infested residue in the field, if you're not rotating resistance genes on that field, if you're not using a strongly resistant variety, things like that, that would kind of lean more towards spraying. Also timing for blackleg, fungicide for blackleg is really important. So you really want to be protecting the cotyledons. So once you're after two leaf, you're kind of getting to the point where you might not be spending your money wisely. So
okay. Lindsay says, don't feel bad. She doesn't know what day it is either.
Thanks, Lindsay. Sorry, I woke up really early. My 3-year-old has been wanting to talk to me at 5 a.m. recently, and those conversations are not always quality. So
I hear you very, very much. Okay, so we've talked about the plant stand counts. We've talked about some of the emergence. I think yesterday I saw on Twitter you're having a conversation with Scott Keller from Alberta.
Yeah.
Talking about the when of that and talking about he does his, what I thought made a lot of sense, doing his final count post-emergence. Or sorry, not post-herbicide application. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's a really great idea. So one thing, if you're out doing counts and you're getting numbers over 100% emergence, that's a good sign that something's maybe not right. Especially
or you need a different calculator.
Or you need so go to the canolacalculator.ca. You can do your emergence, like it'll do the calculation for you there. It also does seeding rate calculations and things like that. But really, like what Scott was referring to, I think is going a little bit later. You know that all of the canola that's going to be contributing to yield is probably up already and growing. And then also if you have any volunteers in the field, they would have been taken care of by that first pass herbicide. So it sort of eliminates that step of having to, sometimes it's really easy looking for volunteers. Like there's one plant that's bigger than the rest of them in between the rows. Well, that's, and it doesn't have a blue seed coat, that's a volunteer. But going after herbicide timing is a really easy way to sort of eliminate that. That said, it's always good to be out looking at your fields. So
when do I know if I'm out of the flea beetle pressure zone? Like the crop, obviously we got to grow out of it. We get ahead of the flea beetles. Is there a certain point where that usually happens? Yeah,
so 4-leaf is a good sort of benchmark for that. But even a little bit earlier, if the new leaves that are coming are clean from damage, like if you've got if you're at 2-leaf and none of your new growth has any flea beetle damage, or very little, then you're probably okay. But 4-leaf for sure. Yeah.
Okay. Once we move out of the herbicide application, then we're moving into that decision on Sclerotinia.
Mm-hmm.
We're off to a bit of a good start here from a moisture perspective, at least for sure here in southern Alberta, but some areas have way too much moisture. Now, those conditions are conducive to having Sclerotinia problems.
Mm-hmm.
Let's go through that scouting.
Yeah, so Sclerotinia is really, we know that Sclerotinia spores are going to be in the landscape.
Yeah.
There's enough canola grown in the prairies that the pathogen is going to be present. We have the host that's present, which is all of the acres of canola that we have. And so then it's really a question of whether the environment is conducive to the disease or not. And Sclerotinia likes a wet canopy. So in southern Alberta, where we are, the irrigated growers, for the most part, will be planning an application of fungicide for Sclerotinia. But the dryland growers might be making some tough decisions this year if the rain keeps coming. So really, it's about kind of looking at your crop canopy and deciding if there's enough moisture in that crop canopy, and there's things like the wet pants test, which is a very high-tech way of scouting for
super scientific.
The
wet pant method is so deep science.
It is deep science. So basically, if you walk through the canola, in the middle of the day and your pants are still wet, the idea is if you've got a thick canopy, if you've got some yield potential, if it can retain some moisture, and if there's some moisture in the forecast, then that's probably, a good reason to be penciling out an insecticide, a fungicide, and getting ready for that.
Now, if this wind continues, though, like we've been getting wind across a good part of the prairies, that probably reduces because we're going to dry that canopy out?
You would hope so, but in central Alberta, where it's just they've been getting so much rain, I mean, how much wind is it going to take to dry them out?
Yeah.
Up north of us. I don't, thankfully, it feels weird to wish for no moisture, but yeah, I'm glad that we're not underwater down here right now. So.
Yeah, I saw the Manitoba crop report that came out this morning. A lot of people dealing with cutworms. That's not a fun one to deal with.
No, and there are some reports of cutworms. Like, I wouldn't say that this year is a huge outbreak year of them. But yeah, another reason to be scouting your fields this time of year and looking for, are the plants there that should be there? So looking at just like the average density and average emergence, but then also like, why are some plants not there? Are there patches that are missing? And if there are, dig around and see if you can find some cutworms. We've also had some pretty extreme winds. So there's been some, shearing off from wind, things like that. Yeah, really this time of year, any day is a good day to be in the field. Try and figure out why your canola plants look the way they do, or if they're missing, why they're gone. So
where do I look for those cutworms? Did you say that?
Dig around in the soil for them.
Like on side hills or top of hills?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. And sometimes you'll see them more so in fields that had some green the fall before. Maybe that would have attracted the adult moths to come and lay some eggs. But really, like missing patches, go dig around and look for them, especially on hillsides. So,
have you seen? What about crusting? That's always a huge concern. We have had lots of wind, so we get moisture. Wind crusted up. Have you seen much out there?
Yeah, this year we did have some because we had, like in my territory, we had some growers, like, upwards of 4+ inches of rain, and then it got warm. And so there was a chance for some crusting. There's not really a whole lot you can do about that, right? You just sort of cross your fingers and hope that they're actually going to break through that. And in most cases, I haven't heard personally of any reseeding as a result, but I know that there's been some issues with some decreased emergence because of crusting this year.
Do you believe in like going out there, what is it called, a rotary hoe? Like where you kind of just sort of just touch the top to kind of break up the crust? Because they do that in some crops.
Yeah, I'd be nervous about it. I don't have experience with that, so I'd be a little bit nervous about that. But if there's somebody out there who's doing it, I'd be interested in learning more. So give me a call. And I would be interested in seeing it. I just get a little bit nervous about
touching the soil.
Just, with those little touching the soil, yes. But then you've also got these little coleoptiles coming up. And depending on how aggressive you are and how much time you're spending doing it, I don't know. It's making me a little nervous.
Good points. What else we got here? Wet feet, drowning. How do we recover from that in some areas?
We cross our fingers, wet feet and drowning, yeah. So we might see some increased root rots as a result of wet conditions. I remember when I first got out of when I first got out of school in 2010, we had some pretty wet springs, and I remember there being, crop that was turning yellow basically, and because it just was not getting enough oxygen and nitrogen and stuff like that. So I think really it's just a matter of really hoping that the rain stops. I wish that there was some magical miracle treatment that could fix the problems that we have, but so far I haven't seen one. Maybe
we're still waiting.
Yeah, maybe maybe that's my retirement gig.
Make sure you apply for the patent.
Yes.
Some inventors make that my invention is for everybody.
Yes.
Yeah, I wish I would have patented that.
No, it'll be a purely commercial venture, I'm sure.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Open source. Open source. For sure. As you talk to you have a weekly agronomic call on the Canola Council of Agronomists. What is kind of the sentiment right now about the crop? What's the mood as all these agronomists are out and covering the entire Western Canadian landscape? They're seeing a good part of the acres in all these different regions. What's the sentiment right now?
Yeah, so it really depends on where you are. So we have this call every Tuesday morning, and us Canola Council agronomists, and also some like the oilseed specialists from the other provinces and the grower groups all get together and kind of talk about the crop condition, what the issues are, what we need to be worried about. In general, like this time of year, there's some comments that, it always looks like this time of year, like the canola is stalling, or like you get worried about it as it's starting to, before it covers canopy. So there's conversations about that. Lots of conversations about the moisture up in central Alberta in the Peace for sure. There's been some frost occurrences in parts of the prairies. I would say in general, we're a little bit optimistic. From my territory, I feel like we're more optimistic than we have been in a long time. We've gotten more rain in the past month than we have the previous, couple growing seasons. So
is this, you mentioned this is kind of when we usually think it stalls out. Is this usually where we feel uncomfortable? Like we need to kind of walk away for a week? Well, we can't walk away for a week. There's things to do in the field, but it would help us if we actually did that and come back, and because we sort of have that like, oh my goodness, we got flea beetles, we've got, weeds, like it's just, there's so much going on and it can look a little ugly, maybe a little uneven,
Yeah, I think this time of year is really hard, right? Because especially if you've had, sometimes canola, when it comes up, it'll like all pop out of the ground at the same time and it looks beautiful, and you pat yourself on the back and you go, maybe you spray your in crop and then you're done until, go deal with your other crops. But yeah, for a lot of fields, like it'll come up at maybe a little bit stagier. If you're having problems with flea beetles and you're not sure about spraying or not, don't just walk away. Go back and check it in a couple days, even if it feels like you don't have time. But really, I think, I'm thinking in terms of like a frost event or the hail event or something like that. Sometimes it is really important to just walk away and come back. Like we said already, like canola kind of is a weed. It can come back from some pretty extreme situations. So sometimes it is really beneficial to walk away. And we were talking about this, I think, before the air, like that big hailstorm in 2013.
Yeah.
In July, there were, I think it was 3 hailstorms in 5 days from Fort Macleod to out past Tabor that just, like I was actually driving out to Manitoba for like their crop diagnostic school or something. So I was driving past all of these fields that should have been in full flower, or coming into flower, and they were just like decimated. And like we got new siding and roof in our house on West Lethbridge. It was a really bad storm, and it was a few weeks later in the season than what we had this year. And quite a bit of that was able to come back. And so guys were, thinking that their crop would be a total failure, or, taking 70% or 80% from crop insurance and then being able to harvest a crop. So I would say don't discount the crop if it's looking a little bit shabby. Try and understand why it looks bad and try and make some notes about things you could do maybe next year to improve. Like if you're, if you are having issues with it coming out of the ground at all different times, well, why? Like, were you going too fast? Are you not getting good enough separation from your seed and fertilizer? If you're going too fast, your forward rows might be buried by your back rows. But, generally we don't see emergence issues as a result of seed quality. We see them as a result of what happened from when it went in the drill to when it came up out of the ground. So
soil not fit.
What's that?
Maybe the soil not fit. Not ready to go?
Maybe. It depends. Like whether you're seeding into too wet and you're kind of, like this spring, I know some growers down here, we had good moisture conditions. And so they maybe went in and seeded when it was a little bit too wet, just because they remember the past 4 years of drought and they just thought, get it in the ground while there's moisture, right? So you might have been, and up in central Alberta or areas where they're getting a lot of water, you might be just going in sort of because you have to, or you feel like you have to. So kind of understanding why your crop looks like it does, but then also, taking time to relax at the lake if you can.
It's a pretty resilient crop. It's pretty rubbery. It's like that boxer that gets knocked down and it has an opportunity to come back. It fools us sometimes.
Yeah, well, and actually, like so when canola is flowering, they say it aborts 50% of its flowers. Like it's able to do that and then create more to compensate. So, it is pretty amazing, and it can stool out. And while, sure, it's better to have a nice uniform stand of 5 to 8 plants per square foot. You can pull pretty decent crops off of less. So.
Have you seen much canola planted this year versus seeded
with a vacuum planter?
Yeah,
I know it's kind of becoming more common, and I think it's kind of exciting that 5, 6, 7 years ago, when this sort of first started becoming a more of a mainstream idea, like more people were talking about it or asking about it. We were working with like 20, 22, 30-inch planters, which is pretty extremely wide row spacing. And so it seems like in the past couple of years, at least I'm hearing of a lot more commercial planters available as 15-inch spacing, which is a whole lot better agronomically for weed control and canopy closure than those wide like 18, 20, 22 plus row spacings. So
yeah, I think a lot of growers, they're excited about the opportunity to maybe drop down in terms of planting density, I guess, and go to less. Traditionally it was always 5 pounds per acre, and we rolled with that. And now we're like talking so much about 1,000 kernel weights, and trying to make sure that we're moving in the right direction.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a case of how low do you feel comfortable going.
It's
scary. It's a little bit scary because if conditions are good, you're going to get away with it.
Yep.
But if you have some adversity, which we can get, it's a struggle.
Yeah, I think, the right rain can make anybody look like a genius, right? But when it comes to, like, honestly, when people first started asking about planters, it kind of used to bug me a little bit because the conversation appeared to be driven by, I can seed at, 2 pounds an acre. Like that was sort of I can seed at 2 pounds an acre.
I'm going to save money.
I'm going to save money. And it was still like, I'm going to seed at 2 pounds an acre, 2.5 pounds an acre. Whereas, like, if you want to save money, then think of it at least in like, okay, so if canola is averaging, say, 45 to 65% emergence-ish in the prairies, sometimes better, sometimes worse. In my mind, if you want to be switching to a planter or something that's going to get you better placement, then you should be thinking about the emergence gains, and you still want to be targeting in that 5 to 8 plants per square foot. And if you talk to the growers who have been using planters for a long time commercially, the ones that were flirting with that really ultra low seeding rates, unless they're using teeny tiny seed and getting the plant populations they need, they don't really stick around with that practice as long.
Oh.
Like you still want, agronomically, there is a shelf around 3 to 4 plants per square foot where your yield predictability and stability really starts to decrease.
Okay.
So it's not, like we talked about canola being a weed. It's not like we know 2 to 3 pounds of nitrogen per bushel of canola. We don't have that same equation for canola seeding or plant densities, but we know that if you want like predictable, stable yield, you want to be in that 5 to 8. And that goes for planters too, right? Maybe you'd be at that 5 plants per square foot. But certainly I would not be recommending anybody seed at 2 or 3 plants per square foot with a target unless you're really good at managing stress.
Right. Well, and managing the weather conditions too.
Oh,
you can't just you can't do that. It's
no.
So you want to. It's one of those things where you want to make the right decisions, and everything's a calculated risk, but you don't want to set yourself up where you've put yourself really behind the 8 ball, and the probability is it's going to be a failure because you were trying to save X amount, and
totally.
you end up losing way more. The risk reward, you gotta weigh that risk reward factor.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And if you start with a thin stand, if you start with that 2 or 3 plants per square foot, any little thing that happens throughout the season is just going to have a bigger effect, right? If you get some flea beetle damage, if you get some cutworms, if you get, maybe there was something that happened that reduced your emergence, like everything is going to take from that. And then on top of that, your harvest is going to be a little bit later. So it's,
right.
there's a reason the recommended density is where it's at. So
what have you been seeing out in the field? Like we're moving to where we're thinking much more about seed size in terms of planting. What do you have you seen anything in the field from an observation standpoint in that regard?
Yeah, I have seen some seed size work this spring. Neil Harker did some work on this, a couple studies back in 2014, or published papers in 14 and 17 on the subject, and what I've seen in the field is representative of that work. That above 3.5-4 grams per thousand seeds, there's not really going to be much of a difference for emergence or yield. There might be some early season biomass differences, but again, is that going to translate into emergence and yield? And will that make up for the fact that, if you're buying a huge seed lot, you're going to be getting less seeds per pound, or less plants per pound out of that. So
okay, I got a question here from Brian, who says, will clubroot resistant canola save the world? Are we worry free? Just carry on.
Brian,
I think he's getting ahead of himself there. I don't know
great question, Brian. Unfortunately, it will not save the world. So resistance is a part of managing clubroot, but really rotation is the number one thing that we need to do. Rotation, sanitation, resistance is on there as well. But you need at least a 2-year break, so at least 1 in 3 for canola, to help break down about 90 to 95% of the spores. That's what the most recent research is showing. So all growers should be using clubroot resistant varieties unless you have some way to accurately scout for clubroot every single acre across your farm very well to know exactly when the spores come to your farm, which pretty sure nobody really does. Yeah. So really using resistant varieties is really, really important. But rotation, scouting, super, super important. Pull plants like starting, really in August, but you can wait, like around swath timing is a really great time because you're going to be out hopefully scouting for blackleg as well, and looking for Sclerotinia damage, looking for bugs. Just always be pulling plants and looking for it.
Well, Brian may be biased, but he says, so what you're saying is just grow more wheat.
Winter wheat, maybe, Brian.
Yeah, this is one where the protocols have changed, right? In terms of managing clubroot, we're learning more about the disease, on how to manage it. We're trying to apply probably a little bit more practicality to some of the best management practices. I think that's probably the best way to describe where we're at right now.
Yeah, I think so. Like when I started with council back in 2013, there was a lot of talk about sanitation and trying to sanitize. Like Ron Howard had just done some work about removing spores and dirt from drills and equipment. I think now we're really shifting to, as you said, like a practical approach. So instead of planning to say pressure wash all of your equipment between fields, like at least make this commitment to yourself that you can, or whoever's running your seeder, whoever's running your cultivator, if you're still doing that, then you're going to be bashing off dirt before you leave a field, just so you're reducing the amount of soil that's moving between field to field. And have a conversation with anybody that's part of your community about what they're doing for sanitation. If they're finding clubroot, it's like in southern Alberta here, there isn't a ton of clubroot, and it's a really awkward conversation, I think, to be the first person who has it. So in 2018, there was a field up by Rocky View in Rocky View County, just southeast of Calgary, that was found with clubroot, and thankfully the grower was okay with reporting it. And that started this huge discussion about it in southern Alberta. So I'm extremely grateful for the grower who actually was willing to come forward, because I think, there's cases where growers are maybe afraid of what would happen if they were the first person in an area to have it. It doesn't mean they're a bad farmer. It's unfortunate. Spores somehow came to your farm, and now we need to manage them. So, it's nice that we have some management options. But really, I think it's about having conversations and keeping the conversation going. And like I traditionally have used like rubber boots and a pail of bleach in the back of my truck and just like rotated through them for scouting. But now, there's another product that we can use to sanitize our footwear and stuff. So there are some other options. So definitely check out clubroot.ca if you've got some more information, or touch base with your local Canola Council agronomist if you're interested in learning more about that stuff.
Yeah, we got some great canola school videos on clubroot, the best management practices too. So
awesome. Yeah, so definitely check those out. Search for those in Canola School.
Yeah, lots of good resources. You got you mentioned to me new CE this summer. What is CE?
Oh, Canola Encyclopedia. So we're this is what's been keeping us agronomists super busy this year. It's one of those projects that Taryn Dixon, our resource manager, has been extremely patient with all of us for, because it's sort of one of those things that that takes a lot of time. So the original Canola Growers Manual, which you might be familiar with, was written by Phil Thomas, who actually unfortunately just passed away just recently. But so this is sort of the evolution of his work there. And so we've all been working really hard to get all of those sections updated, and then it'll be released this summer, hopefully. So yeah.
In all formats, or?
So it's going to be available online. It's sort of going to look like Wikipedia, like that style. So a really searchable, comprehensive
cool.
source for canola agronomic information. So I'm sure we'll talk more about that when it comes out.
Oh, absolutely. Good stuff. Autumn, we've been talking for 35 minutes.
Oh, really? Oh, yeah.
No, it's been great. It's been awesome to chat canola with you. We're definitely going to do this again, because we love having guests into the studio. This has been a great first to be able to do RealAg Live with a live studio guest and not just on Skype or the phone.
Really exciting to see people that I'm not related to.
Yeah, we're now in a cohort together.
Awesome.
So there
Sounds
you go.
good.
If you do want more information on canola agronomy, where should they go to get some Canola Council resources?
Yeah, so canolawatch.org is updated really regularly. It's nice, short, easy to access information, and then that'll link to the encyclopedia as well. But canolawatch.org is always a great place. And then, when you're out scouting fields, if you want to calculate your emergence easily, just go to Canola Encyclopedia, the canolacalculator.ca, and there's a lot of great tools on there for calculating emergence and seeding rates, things like that.
Of course, canolaschool.com as well. And Autumn mentioned it, the passing of Phil Thomas, really one of the leaders in early canola research. Mm-hmm. He wrote the original Canola Encyclopedia. He was his nickname was Mr. Canola.
Yeah.
So he will definitely be missed. He was a great man.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, thanks everybody for tuning in today to RealAg Live. Really do appreciate it. If you have any feedback, you can send me an email, shaney@realagriculture.com, or you can call the RealAg listener line, 855-776-6147. Thank you very much for getting real and getting connected with RealAg Live, and we'll see you next time. Cheers, everybody.